is Joe Biden's son. And I yield back.
Yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserved. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentleman from New York, the Democratic leader, Mr. Jeffries.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong opposition to this fake, fraudulent, and fictitious impeachment inquiry effort. We are here today on the House floor wasting time and taxpayer dollars on an illegitimate impeachment inquiry because Donald Trump, the puppet master, has directed extreme MAGA Republicans to launch a political hit job against President Joe Biden. There is no evidence that President Biden has engaged in an impeachable offense. There is no evidence that President Joe Biden has engaged in wrongdoing. There is no evidence that President Biden has broken the law. We know that President Joe Biden is a good, honorable, and decent man, dedicated his life to public service, to making a difference for the American people. But the puppet master in chief, Donald Trump, has directed the sycophants to target Joe Biden as part of an effort to undermine President Biden's reelection. That's the pattern, that's the process, and it reveals that our extreme MAGA Republican colleagues have done nothing whatsoever when it comes to making a difference in the lives of everyday Americans. From the very beginning of this Congress, House Democrats have made clear that we are ready, willing, and able to find common ground with our Republican colleagues in a bipartisan way on any issue. But Republicans, this do-nothing Republican Congress has chosen to do nothing to solve problems for hard-working American taxpayers. Nothing on the economy, nothing on inflation, nothing on affordability, nothing on gun safety, nothing on trying to improve the quality of life of the American people. But what we have seen from the very beginning of this do-nothing Republican Congress is chaos and dysfunction and extremism being inflicted on the American people. When it comes to this fraudulent impeachment inquiry, more than 100,000 pages of documents have been produced and reviewed. Not a scintilla of evidence exists that President Biden has broken the law. It's interesting to me, I wonder how my colleagues in New York and California, who were sent here to make life better for the American people, explain this vote, which is not designed to improve the lives of the folks that we are privileged to serve, but is a political hit job, a political stunt, political gamesmanship. The American people are tired of the partisanship, tired of the brinksmanship, tired of this effort to score political points on a partisan basis as opposed to actually making a difference. House Democrats will continue to put people over politics. We will continue to fight for lower costs, to grow the middle class, for safer communities, fight for reproductive freedom, defend democracy, and build an economy from the middle out and the bottom up as opposed to the top down. House Democrats remain committed to joining President Biden and advancing the ball for the American people, for the middle class, for low-income families, for working families, for all those folks who aspire to be a part of the middle class, for young people, for older Americans, for our veterans. We plan to continue to build upon the progress that we've made under the leadership of President Biden on behalf of the American people. And it's time for the extreme MAGA Republicans to join us or get out of the way. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I continue to reserve my time.
Gentleman continues to reserve. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, Mr. Garcia.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This impeachment inquiry is a political stunt with zero evidence. We're here today not because of any wrongdoing by President Biden, but because Donald Trump wants revenge. Welcome to the Donald Trump Revenge Show. He's running a campaign promising to destroy democracy and the rule of law, and will soon be found guilty of serious crimes. The American people will reject this toxic and disgusting agenda. That's why Trump's allies here in Congress are trying to rescue him. They're throwing everything they can at President Biden, from misleading leaks to outright fabrications and lies. They're even trying to sell debunked Rudy Giuliani conspiracy theories. And let's be clear, the White House has provided thousands of pages of bank records, statements from personal bank accounts, and testimony from the president's family. But none of this is enough for the extreme MAGA GOP. This is all to appease the con man and the criminal, Donald Trump. But make no mistake, the American people will see through this entire impeachment sham. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I continue to reserve my time.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to yield 1 1/2 minutes to the gentleman from Colorado, a distinguished member of the Rules Committee, Mr. Neguse.
Gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 90 seconds.
I thank the Speaker. I thank the ranking member. Republicans have had a majority in this House for 11 months. And what do they have to show for it? Nothing. No efforts to grow the middle class, no efforts to lower costs, no efforts to build safer communities. Instead, an effort to default on our nation's debt, 2 attempts to shut down the government, vacating their own speaker, and now a baseless impeachment that they are pursuing for one reason and one reason alone, because former President Trump ordered them to do so. You ask them to articulate what crime they are investigating, they can't give you an answer. You ask them to identify any evidence of wrongdoing by President Biden, crickets. Mr. Speaker, the American people, I can assure you, are deeply disappointed in the actions that House Republicans have taken for the better part of the last year. And this action is no different. I urge my colleagues, reject this farce of a process, and let's get back to doing the important work that the American people expect us to do. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I continue to reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, if we defeat the previous question, I will offer an amendment to the rule to bring up H.R. 12, a bill that would ensure every American has full access to essential reproductive health care, including abortion care. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of my amendment into the record along with extraneous material immediately prior to the vote on the previous question. And to discuss our proposal, I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Ms. Trahan.
Without objection, gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, this entire charade is ridiculous. Speaker Johnson is about to send members of Congress home for the rest of the year. And instead of lowering costs for families before the holidays or protecting women's freedom to make their own health decisions, House Republicans are taking orders from Donald Trump to force through a partisan political impeachment with no evidence, no witnesses, and no wrongdoing on behalf of the president. Meanwhile, as we speak, Kate Cox, a pregnant woman from Texas, is being forced to flee her home as Republican leaders try to force her to carry her baby to term, who was diagnosed with a terrible condition that would result in miscarriage, stillbirth, or death soon after birth. We could have come to the floor today to pass legislation like the Women's Health Protection Act to protect women like Kate Cox and to prevent that kind of physical harm and trauma from being inflicted on women living under Republican abortion bans. But House Republicans choose impeachment. The American people won't forget. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Can I inquire how much time is left?
Gentleman has 3 3/4 minutes remaining.
3 3/4, okay.
Gentleman from Oklahoma has 6 3/4 minutes.
Does the gentleman have any other speakers, or? Okay, all right. I'm happy to yield now 1 minute to the gentleman from Washington, Ms. Jayapal.
Gentlelady from Washington is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Extreme MAGA Republicans in the House are on a Donald Trump-directed fishing expedition. In fact, they've been on a fishing expedition for months with embarrassing results. Nothing. No bites, no evidence for anything that justifies impeachment. There are no fish to catch in this Republican swamp. And good luck to all these Republicans who have to go home and justify a sham impeachment to their districts while telling them that we haven't passed the budget, we haven't reauthorized the farm bill, we haven't done a single thing that helps Americans live their lives. Instead, we're wasting time on bogus censure resolutions and bogus impeachment inquiries. We have 1.5 legislative business days left in the year. We should be passing bills to help working families, but that is not what we do under extreme Republicans' control. Vote no on this new fishing expedition. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I continue to reserve my time.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, Republicans are saying the quiet part out loud, and I ask unanimous consent to insert in the record a Rolling Stone article from today entitled GOP Rep Explains Impeachment Push, Donald J. Trump 2024 Baby. I reserve.
Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to my very good friend, the distinguished gentleman from North Dakota, also the sponsor of the resolution.
Gentleman from North Dakota is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Here's what we know. We know that the President Biden's transition team ran interference for Hunter Biden and obstructed law enforcement's attempts to interview the president's son. We know that somebody in the FBI decided not to investigate bribery allegations against Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, provided by a confidential informant. That source is so important that the FBI has deemed him so credible that they opposed the release of the report and only agreed for a review in a classified setting. We know that the IRS investigators were not allowed to follow leads that had the potential to implicate President Biden in Hunter Biden's alleged financial crimes. We know that recommendations for prosecution of Hunter Biden were denied or delayed until the statute of limitations had run. We know that a plea deal was offered to Hunter Biden by the DOJ that offered him global immunity for crimes outside the scope of the charged conduct, and that plea deal only fell apart after whistleblowers came forward to Congress. Set aside for a minute the $24 million, the 20-plus shell companies, the payments to President Biden, and the changing narrative from this White House every time a new bad fact comes to light. Set that aside. These instances alone should concern all Americans, because it appears that people in the highest echelons of our government were running interference for the president's sons. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle have an innocent explanation for every single incident. The problem is, it's very difficult to see an innocent explanation for all of the incidents. The FBI, the DOJ, the IRS, and the president's political operation have all frustrated attempts to investigate the Bidens. Obstruction is a crime, and it's no less of a crime if it's being used within the highest powers of government to perpetrate that coercion. Take all of the politics out of this, there is no investigator in any jurisdiction in the world that would not continue to investigate this investigation with these facts. The purpose of the impeachment inquiry is for the House to authorize impeachment and strengthen its ability to compel testimony and document production response to congressional subpoenas. This will allow the House to continue its investigation into whether President Biden changed U.S. policy due to payments received by the Biden family members from hostile foreign powers, or whether he knowingly allowed foreign powers to believe that the payments were being made and to employ the Biden family members would result in access and the ability to alter U.S. policy, or whether the President and the President's administration were using government agencies to obstruct investigations into Hunter and Joe Biden. This inquiry is warranted. It will put the House of Representatives in the best legal position possible to uncover the facts, and the American people deserve nothing less. I yield back.
It's back. Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm the last speaker on our side. Are you prepared to close?
I am prepared to close.
Okay.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the remaining time.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this inquiry has nothing to do with Joe Biden. It's about the Republican Party and how radicalized and extreme they've become. They are allergic to truth and transparency. Republicans say this is not about a preordained outcome. It is. They are going to try to impeach President Biden despite the fact that there's no evidence against him at all. Trump sent a violent MAGA mob here to the Capitol to reverse the election results and certify that he won even though he lost. What they couldn't do on January 6th, they want to do with this extreme political stunt. They have contempt for our democracy. They want to finish the job. Republicans say this is all about process, about how the House will proceed. It is not. The truth is this process has already proceeded for 10 months. They have been investigating all year, obtaining tens of thousands of documents, hours and hours of witness testimony. All of it says no wrongdoing by President Biden. Republicans say the White House is stonewalling their inquiry. Again, not true. The White House has provided over 35,000 pages of financial records, dozens of hours of testimony and interviews. Hunter Biden is here to testify today, and Republicans won't let him because they want to do it in secret so they can cherry pick and distort his testimony. This whole inquiry has nothing to do with the integrity of President Biden and everything to do with the lack of integrity in the House and the Republican Party. No amount of evidence could convince Republicans that Joe Biden did nothing wrong because they aren't looking for the truth. They're looking for revenge. And I would just say directly to the American people, Mr. Speaker, that the Republican Party works for Donald Trump, not for you, for Trump. That's why they are pursuing this extreme political stunt. That's why they are doing everything in secret. They want to hide the truth from you because they know their whole impeachment inquiry is a sham. And it will evaporate into thin air when people realize what a pathetic joke it is. This shameful process has no credibility, it has no legitimacy and no integrity. I urge my colleagues to vote no, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Members are reminded to direct their comments to the chair and not to perceive the viewing audience. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time. And in closing, I urge all my colleagues to support the resolution. We've heard a lot today, heard a lot about Donald Trump. We've had ad infinitum insults to the majority. We've had pejorative language. We've had pounding on the table. And why? Simply because we want to empower 3 committees of Congress to do what the White House asked us to do, that is, have a formal vote on the floor before we fully cooperate. That's all we're doing. If my friends are so confident, again, as one of my colleagues mentioned from the Rules Committee, what are you worried about? It's an investigation. It's open. We hardly talked about what the resolution's about, which is how we're going to proceed. And how are we going to proceed? Almost exactly as my friends proceeded in 2019. Their playbook, their play, their approach. So there's nothing unfair that we're asking to be done. Since September, the House has been engaged in an impeachment inquiry examining whether sufficient grounds exist for the House to exercise constitutional power to impeach the President of the United States. Today's resolution simply formalizes that inquiry and grants the House full authority to enforce its subpoenas, subpoenas that have been denied as recently as today. You know, my friends have some pretty experienced lawyers on their side. Most of them would tell you it's better to have a deposition before you have a hearing, let alone a trial. All we're trying to do is get the needed people who have been blocked or refused to cooperate to come in and testify under oath before Congress. The resolution follows closely, again, as I said, the procedures established in 2019 and empowers the three committees to continue their existing inquiries. At the end of the inquiry, it provides for the Judiciary Committee, the traditional impeachment committee, to report to the House resolutions, articles of impeachment, or other recommendations. It's deeply unfortunate that we're here, Mr. Speaker, but today's resolution will ensure that the House can fulfill its obligations under the Constitution. And so it is with respect for the Constitution, for this institution, and for this great nation that we proceed. That's all we're trying to do today. We had very little discussion of that, but we ought to entertain that. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I want to remind everybody of a few facts. We have millions of dollars from foreign entities that have flowed towards shell companies that we didn't know even existed until the investigations uncovered that. We have whistleblowers, public servants of long standing that have come in and told us their efforts to investigate the either Hunter Biden or the wider schemes have been obstructed. We have lots of things to be concerned about. Our committees need to be empowered with the tools that are required to pursue the truth and then come back and tell us what they found and have a recommendation as to how we could proceed. That's all today is about. So, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
The gentleman yields back. The question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays have been requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed.
For what purposes the gentlelady from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to insert extraneous material on H.R. 1147.
Without objection. Pursuant to House Resolution 922 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House and the Committee of the Whole on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 1147. The Chair appoints the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Desjardins, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
Wait for this. The House is in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 1147, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill to amend the Richard B. Russell National School Lunch Act to allow schools to participate in the school lunch program under such act to serve whole milk.
Pursuant to the rule, the bill is considered read the first time. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Education and the Workforce or their respective designee. The gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Scott, each control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I rise in strong support of H.R. 1147. It's Christmas time across America. For many, the season brings with it the annual return of cherished Christmas traditions, such as leaving milk and cookies out for Santa Claus and his reindeer to enjoy. As for my family, our traditional choice of dairy has always been whole milk. We want only the most nutritional option for Santa. The nutrients in whole milk, like protein, calcium, and vitamin D, provide the fuel Santa needs to travel the whole globe in one night. Whole milk is the unsung hero of his Christmas journey. Protein helps build and repair Santa's muscles. Hoisting heavy sacks of gifts up and down the chimney is no easy task. Calcium is vital for strong bones. It is calcium that keeps Santa strong and sturdy as he dashes from rooftop to rooftop. And vitamin D is essential to a strong immune system. Santa absolutely needs one as he braves the cold, wintry night. You see, it's not just the magic of the season that helps Santa deliver presents worldwide. It's also the fortifying nutrients of whole milk. Reflecting on Christmas traditions this year begs the question, if whole milk is a good option to fuel Santa's extraordinary Christmas Eve journey, then why isn't it an option for American school children in their lunchrooms? That's why I support Representative G.T. Thompson's Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act, a bill allowing unflavored and flavored whole milk to be offered in school cafeterias. Since 2012, the National School Lunch and Breakfast Program has allowed only low-fat and fat-free milk options for American school children. This means 2% and whole milk have been excluded from the daily diets of an entire generation of kids. The USDA intends to finalize another rule which will further limit milk options. Anti-milk advocates advance one main argument against whole milk, that whole milk is bad for kids. Rather, milk has 13 essential nutrients that are needed for children to live healthy lives and succeed in school. It's an essential ingredient to growth and development. Research shows that whole milk is associated with a neutral or lower risk of heart disease and obesity. Moreover, the USDA contradicts itself by limiting milk options for young children. On one hand, it recognizes that children are at risk of under-consuming dairy. Yet on the other, it creates policies that will only exacerbate the problem. If Americans have learned anything from these past 3 years, it's that scientific authorities tend to contradict themselves. The truth is that whole milk is a significant source of vital nutrients for children's growth and development. The federal bureaucracy should never stand in between your children and a nutritious lunch. The Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act isn't about advocating for one type of milk over another. It's about providing parents, schools, and food service providers with the option to choose what's best for our children's nutrition. This act does not aim to diminish the importance of other milk varieties. Rather, it seeks to restore the availability of a wholesome, natural option that has been a staple for generations. This bill is about choice. It's a chance to empower parents and schools to make informed choices about what goes into our children's diets. Whether it's the nutritional foundation for Santa's journey or your child's math homework, let's not discount the benefits of whole milk. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from North Carolina reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to H.R. 1147, the Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act. School meals are critical in reducing child hunger and providing children with the healthy foods they need. Milk, offered as part of these meals, can help deliver essential nutrients that are vital to a child's development. That is why it is so important that we provide students with the most nutritious milk options. Child nutrition standards for school meals, including milk options, are guided by the Science-Based Dietary Guidelines for Americans, or the DGAs, which are periodically updated based on recommendations from child nutrition experts and input from the public. The latest DGAs, along with the American Heart Association, American Academy of Pediatrics, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and over a dozen other public health advocates agree that fat-free and low-fat milk are the healthiest options for children. Regrettably, H.R. 1147 attempts to legislate nutrition standards and disregard the evidence-based recommendations made by the DGAs. Furthermore, the bill would undermine the Biden administration's ongoing rulemaking to better align school nutrition standards with the latest science. This bill would allow schools participating in the National School Lunch Program to offer whole milk and reduced fat milk, violating the current science-based standards that protect children's health. Whole milk contains far more saturated fat, cholesterol, and calories than fat-free and low-fat milk. Conversely, fat-free and low-fat milk offer the same vital nutrients, including calcium, vitamin D, vitamin A, protein, and potassium, as whole milk. Nutrition standards must be guided by scientists, not politicians. If someone wants to offer one study or another to be considered, use the DGA process, not the political process. This bill needlessly inserts politics into a science-based process. Lastly, I'm disappointed by the majority's decision to depart from precedent by moving a child nutrition bill outside of a comprehensive child nutrition reauthorization. Rather than improve our nation's child nutrition programs holistically, the majority has decided to prioritize interfering with evidence-based nutrition standards for our children's school meals. For that reason, Mr. Chairman, I oppose the bill and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to tell my colleague something that I think will be easy to remember about why we're doing this. Scientists/experts designed the Titanic amateurs scientists, experts built the Titanic, and amateurs built the Ark. I now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman.
Gentleman's recognized.
Well, thank you. Well, we're making biblical allusions. I think just last week we were at this microphone talking about National Bible Week, and I think one of the phrases that you run across again and again as you read the Bible is that God promised Abraham a land flowing of milk and honey. I'll let the body decide what type of milk Abraham or the Lord was promising Abraham. I think I know. In any event, for some reason, as somebody who's been drinking milk my whole life, I can tell you a better tasting milk and a milk that I think is more likely to be consumed is whole milk. For some reason, the current administration is waging war on milk. The USDA's current restrictions on school lunches are limiting nutritious options for kids. This comes at a time when it's found that 90% of Americans do not eat enough dairy to meet dietary recommendations. Drinking milk leads to better bone health and lower risk for type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. Additionally, milk stands as a leading and accessible source of 9 essential nutrients that children often fall short of. Proposed guidelines such as limiting milk options by age group and counting milk fat against weekly saturated allowance threaten to deprive students of essential nutrients. It is crucial that students have access to nutritional benefits of milk, and with these restrictions, they might choose to forego milk entirely if you have to drink the less tasty 1% or, even worse, fat-free milk. These proposed restrictions ignore several recent research studies examining the effect of higher fat milk consumption, which found that it is associated with lower childhood obesity, and concluded that dietary guidelines that recommend reduced fat milk versions might not provide a benefit in lowering the risk of childhood obesity, which we are all for. I implore each of you to consider the Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act of 2023 as a common sense solution to ensure that we have healthy children. Thank you for your attention, and I ask my fellow members to vote yes on H.R. 1147.
Gentleman's time's expired. Gentlelady from North Carolina.
I reserve, Mr. Chair.
Gentlelady from North Carolina reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield such time as you may consume to the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Ranking Member Scott, for your time and leadership in this matter. I rise today in opposition to this bill. Monday night, the Rules Committee considered my amendment number 16 to H.R. 1147, which would have provided an alternative, a healthy alternative to our young people that cannot digest milk. I've heard my colleagues on the other side of the aisle suggest that this was a choice. Well, if there were a choice, then why not add soy as a choice? Soy gives the equivalent of the nutritional values as whole milk, but it does not have the negative impact that whole milk has on a large swath of people in our community. I will tell you those numbers. 95% of Native Americans have lactose intolerance. 90% of African Americans lactose intolerant. 65% of Latino Americans, 65% are in fact lactose intolerant. Asian Americans, 90%. These are real numbers. This is not about taste. This is not about profit. This is not about bottom line. This is not about a powerful lobby. This is about the safety, nutrition, and well-being of our young people. We cannot ignore the impacts that ingesting or attempting to digest things that your body cannot, and what impacts it has on one's ability to concentrate or do well in the classroom. My colleagues and I formed a diverse group represented by chairs of the Congressional Hispanic and Asian and Pacific Islander caucuses and vice chairs of as vice chair of the CBC respectfully. We all firmly believe that the full House should be allowed to debate this important measure. making sure that we were given the opportunity on the floor to debate this amendment, which I believe, if given the opportunity to be heard, even the other side could have and would have been able to support. What's most perplexing is the denial of this amendment aligns with the purposes of the underlying bill to expand